It's happened again. Once more, Bungie are doing a complete overhaul of their game in the face of quitting players and weak spending, all of course while Sony's live service plan, the very thing that Bungie is supposed to be their in-house expert at, has ran aground the likes of Concord. But unfortunately, the bad news doesn't stop there. The final shape was a staggering success and it won loads of people back. And the reward for the players and the developers was just deeper layoffs at Bungie. So this is not just bad news happening, it's deeper than that. It is hope being crushed. And it's in that context of crushed hope that Bungie have went and unveiled their new plan. It's a plan that maybe some people would normally think is fantastic, but here it feels like shrinkflation. It's worrying, and it's this: 2 expansions a year. Yes, an expansion every 6 months. That's the new plan. And part of me does want to steelman it to basically say it's a live game. Having a big new thing every 6 months is fantastic. That'll keep it alive. But given all the context, it does look like the last desperate move of a company that's been acquired by Sony, and Sony are the very people who looked at Insomniac, the producers of back-to-back critical and commercial hits, and they just saw another cost-cutting opportunity. Even Insomniac wasn't safe, and Sony are the very same company that thought Concord was a brilliant idea. So, by now, most people are biased against Sony things in this area, and not unfairly. But the actual workers at Bungie, well, they did the final shape. We know they can make incredible content, so can they prove us wrong? And even if they did, I'm suspicious. Why have Bungie not revealed pricing? They know it's going to be the #1 thing in people's minds. Half the expansion should be half the price, right? Either way, though, you can help us afford it. What's today's sponsor? Who are Pork Bun. Now, they've been named the top domain registrar by USA Today for 2023 and 2024, and today they're running a hell of a deal on a .world domain, where it's under $2 for the first year. Yes, under $2. Now, .world is a great top-level domain that'll stand out there. It'll be perfect for so many use cases, whether you've got, say, world in the name of your company or, your organization. Maybe you've got a global audience. Maybe you're doing things that are travel-related. In those cases, a .world domain is pretty damn awesome, and Pork Bun is the place to go to manage your domains, because you see things like Whois privacy, SSL certificates, web and email hosting trials. Those are free, not upcharged. So yes, they're not going to charge you more money for Whois privacy. And then actually using Pork Bun is dead easy because of their simple, clean, clear UI. Plus, it all comes backed by personalized 5-star support 365 days a year. So you can go and get yourself a .world domain, one that will stand out against the soup of generic domains that everybody's used to, so that your site can stand out and be memorable. It's less than $2 a year for the first year, and all you need to do is check out the link and the code in my description. And a big thanks to Pork Bun for supporting our team. Okay. Structure. 2024 saw Bungie unveil a bit of a bold plan, basically to do episodes. Their old model of doing 4 seasons a year would die. Instead, they would have 3 episodes, and then each episode would be 3 acts long. And the details of that don't really matter, but the point does. Every 6 weeks, there would be something new and shiny. That was the plan. It's a neat enough plan. People who have played may disagree, but what matters is it's now a dead plan. So as the subreddit says, rip episodes 2024 to 2024. So here's the new plan, an expansion every 6 months. Within each expansion, there's going to be 2 major updates, and each of those will have a reward pass, and it all kicks off with summer 2025's Apollo. And look, normally my eyes would glaze over at all of this stuff, but I've got to admit to you, one of their statements does actually hook me, and here it is. We are actively prototyping non-linear campaigns, exploration experiences similar to the Dreaming City or Metroidvanias, and even more unusual formats like roguelites or survival shooters. I've got to be honest with you, that sounds amazing, but the reason why is pretty clear. They've basically just name-dropped a whole bunch of things that we've got positive associations with because they tend to be pretty damn interesting, and then they name-dropped the Dreaming City, which was a fantastic piece of Destiny 2 content. But still, even with a little skepticism, I actually think that plan could work. More of the same, but it's a little bit better, or maybe a bit worse, is basically what the yearly expansion model kind of gives you. Another slice of a big campaign, and I'm sure it's something you've felt before as well, where it's like, yeah, it's pretty good, but it's more of the same, and now I'm interested in something different. So if you tell me, hey, Destiny 2 has a roguelite mini expansion, it's really fun, then what will happen is I'll remember that Destiny's gunplay is top tier. I'll remember having fun, I'll see novelty, and then I'll decide to play. Such a big change is obviously a risk to me, but so too are real big expansions. At least here, you can recover a bit quicker if you've got a more brisk content cadence. Beyond that then, 2 free major updates within each one of those expansions, and those will come with, oh yes, reward passes. which means I'm now thinking about money and the lack of details in this post. And I kind of like the core idea here, but again, if their plan is to only charge slightly less per expansion and then go deep on tying the reward passes to gameplay progression, then I'm getting suspicious, because when you look at the reward passes, you see it's all cosmetic, and then you see upgrade currency, and given Bungie's financial problems, how they've literally said like one of their big pain points was an expansion earning in its live service 45% under revenue projections, you kind of think they're going to be doing things to get more money. So I see upgrade currency, I don't get thrilled, I see and more, and well, I start to imagine the creative ways they'll try to get money out of me. But what could make things a bit better, frankly, is Destiny. Destiny 2 is kind of hell. And look, I play World of Warcraft, so I know what it's like to have game systems, to be waterboarded with proper nouns, but good god, Destiny is an overwhelming and confusing experience for a returning player, let alone a new player. And it's on this front where they basically are trying to fix things up with their next objective, which is overhauling the core game experience on 3 fronts, and those are activities, rewards, and the relationship of those things to challenge. Put simply, right, Bungie have identified there's a massive activity sprawl in the game. A real big checklist, loads of esoteric things that you sort of need a guide to understand, and it's just all rather unclear, and it's bloated. So here's their plan. Each major update is going to select a set of activities, it's going to refresh them with changes and content that are of course tied into the theme of the update, and then those will be put on the current rotation. So essentially a more focused content experience week to week, and essentially like the signal to noise problem being a bit better. On top of that then, we got gear. So gear rewards are being divvied up into different loot pools per content type, and legendaries are being changed. Legendaries can drop at higher tiers, and the higher tiers will basically layer on like modifiers, perks, stats, and that kind of thing, and you've got different loot pools being added on an expansion and update basis with a new bit of UI that tells you if an item is part of like a new addition in the most recent content. And that all ties into the final big thing, which is challenge. Basically, they said, we want the challenge of the content you're doing to actually, reflect the gear that you get. So what they have here is a bit of a mock-up UI of how you can layer on more difficulty for better rewards, and thankfully they did make sure to say that like it's not just some flat percentage damage scaling. So big picture, and it's big picture that matters today, it seems they want more clarity in how their game works, right? More defined loot pools per activity, clearer rewards, players actually knowing what events are part of the current season. And knowing what Destiny can feel like to a new or returning player, that all seems like good change. But change is also change, and it's inherently risky. And this change is replacing their 2024 plan, which itself was already a change. So, does that kind of mean we're a bit screwed and they don't really know what's going on? The fundamental question is, what do we actually want from a game like this? And I think basically the answer is we want content that's reasonably placed, that's well designed and consistent. Essentially something where we can trust our time, that we can always have that as our safe backup game. And this plan totally ticks those boxes, or at least it tries to. And you can understand the motivation for changing. If Bungie half-break themselves to make a mostly one-and-done campaign, and then have got no fuel left in the tank to do the live service well, when the live service is the bit that we actually play day to day, then we end up in a bad, unsustainable situation. I mean, hell, look at some other games. Final Fantasy XIV nailed Shadowbringers patch content, it nailed Endwalker launch, and then they kind of ran aground after that. They seemingly just didn't allocate the resources as well. For World of Warcraft, Warlords of Draenor was an epic 1-month-long expansion that pretty much fainted at its climax. And so when so much work goes into the new campaign, the thing that realistically only matters for like a week or two, yeah, you can see how it doesn't make sense. Now they say Apollo, the next expansion, kicks off a multi-year story with a non-linear character-driven adventure. That is something that could feel like cheap trash. Or it could reflect how Destiny is an interactive video game. I mean, I've had my fill of playable blockbuster movies, I can also go and get them elsewhere. And to be frank with the strengths and weaknesses of Bungie's storytelling, I actually think something like that could be for the better. And this is also not some sort of crazy knee-jerk reaction to Final Shape. The timelines and comments from laid-off staff show that this was partially in production before the last round of layoffs. But there's two things that really are scary here, are worrying. Language and money. They say new locations. What does that actually mean? In the reward pass, they say, and more. What does that actually mean? Is a new location a new planet, a new subzone? I mean, a Warcraft update gives you a new zone that's part of its expansion's continent. Is it of that scale? They talk about content reuse. Is it going to be a cheap rehash? I mean, done right, that could be them taking the game back to somewhere that I'm nostalgic for, that I actually care about, not just the latest shiny thing pulled out of a hat. or it could be just cheap. They mentioned dungeons and raids, which is great, but again, how many? And the thing is, if trust existed, then we would take this information and be excited about the new possibilities, but trust doesn't exist, and it's not really about not trusting the games team. Their quality doesn't matter if Bungie is a shit show, and Sony's bean counters basically hamstring the whole company. And I think that's because both parties, Sony and Bungie, don't even understand the real point here. If you screw up, or I screw up, like, it's fine. It's our own mistake. We own it. If your boss screws up, well, you don't own that. It's a thing that's happened that's outside of your control. So you eventually just say to yourself, oh, this is a shit show. I just don't care anymore. I'm just going to check in. I'm going to collect my paycheck and I'm going to leave. And here's the reason why I bring that up. A lot of emerging research into the topic of burnout, which is something that's very much impacting the world, basically boils down to people's perceived lack of control over their circumstances and their future. And I think that matters extremely in a field like this, where it's very passion and creativity driven. That is a big problem. And I think that is the root of why gaming is a mess these days. Customers essentially feel disconnected from games. If you care about a game, you often get burned. If you don't care about a game, oh, you don't get burned. You don't lose your time. Instead, you're apathetic and cynical, and now you enjoy games less. That's what it's like as somebody who buys games. Imagine what it's like if you're somebody who's worked in Bungie. And that's why I'd say, hello, Sony. You will not feel the downside of these problems this quarter or next quarter, but make no mistake, slowly but surely, the rot sets in. And thus far, it's a rot that our industry has tried to overcome with business strategy, because it's easier to make a compelling pricing ladder than it is to make a compelling product. That is how AAA has limped on. So, Bungie, will it be half the expansion at half the price? What about an annual pass? How will that work? When I buy an expansion, do I get the expansion but not the 2 reward passes? Will those reward passes be squeezing me, teasing me with faster progress? Here's an amazing example. Microtransaction revenue lifetime of Diablo 4 actually leaked in LinkedIn, and it was $150 million. That's a lot of money to you or me, but the entire Asian mobile game market is on the floor laughing at such a low number. And that's because their microtransactions, they give you aesthetics and progress. They give you things that you want, and we already know the reward pass has got upgrade materials. So it's a question of, do you trust this? But even worse, if this is a plan that will save Bungie, it won't happen for a while, and the now is not looking good. And that's because people saying RIP seasons 2024 to 2024 actually might be for the best. You see, there's something that I didn't tell you at the top of the video. The final shape slapped. However, episodes didn't. A single story delivered over 14 weeks. In a way, that sounds amazing, just like excitedly waiting for next week's episode of your favorite show. Just that this is a game that you play, and in reality, it wasn't that. It was a big drop in day one, and then a finale. It didn't really work that well. It's abundantly clear that they're trying to ship less content, and when you look at the Steam numbers, you see that Destiny 2 is currently at an all-time low. So even if this is an amazing plan, will they survive, and how many players will they hold on to? And when the plan comes to fruition, who's going to be willing to come back, given it's a competitive industry, that the final shape is the natural endpoint of the big story that everybody has worked up to, meaning, just like with Infinity War and Endgame, a lot of people have just decided, okay, I'm getting off the train. And with this being the natural trend of things, I think there's a reason why so many companies are just left extracting as much cash from their superfans as they can. That's clearly Sony's plan with the PS5 Pro. It certainly won't appeal to the people who still have a PS4 and didn't even think that a PS5 was enough to upgrade with. And trust me, there's a lot more to that story, and you can check out our coverage of it right over here next.